Hi everyone, now we're going to plant a tree. The very first thing you need to do is to put on gloves. This is very important. You need to be safe in the soil when you're working with soil and working it with your hands. So that's the very first step I'm going to take. We're going to plant what's called a sassafras tree. That's this little tree right here. This is a method of growing the tree in a container or a pot. So this is called a 3-gallon size pot. It has the soil in there in which it's been growing, and all the roots are in there. That's the nice thing about a container grown tree. So we're going to plant this native species sassafras tree as a Delaware tree from this container. The next step is we have to decide where we're going to plant the tree. There's a lot that goes into this decision. You have to think about what's overhead, what's nearby, where are the roots going to spread, is it going to get enough sunlight, is it going to get enough water, is it on a slope? So I've decided this spot right here based on all those considerations. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to rake some of these leaves away from the spot where I'm going to dig the hole. If you're planting this in grass, you don't need to do this part. Next, we're going to place the tree where it's going to be planted. This is really important because we have to decide how big the hole is that we need to dig. So I'm going to take the tree and place it right here. This is where it's going to go. And we have to dig the hole 2 to 3 times as wide as the pot, but to the same depth. That's really important for giving the roots plenty of soil space to start growing when the tree is first planted. So now that we have the tree placed where we're going to be planting it, I'm going to mark a circle around the tree for the size of the hole to make sure it's wide enough, but I'm not digging yet, not quite. Now that I've marked the size of the hole with my shovel, I'm going to move the tree back out and I'm going to start digging. Now remember, you don't want to dig the hole too deep. You want to dig it to the same depth as the pot that the tree is already in. And the best way to do it is you want to have a flat bottom so that this tree doesn't sink down into loose soil once it's planted. Okay, I've pretty much got my hole dug. Now let's test and see if it's to the right depth. Is it deep enough? Is it too deep? I hope not. There's a way to test. By putting the pot in the hole, you can see the level of the soil in the pot, and this is a handy little trick. If you put your shovel handle across the hole, you can see that it's really quite close to where we want it to be in terms of the depth of the pot and the depth of the hole. Now comes the fun part. We're actually going to plant the tree. So if the pot is a little too big for you to handle or a little too heavy, get someone to help you. But you hold the pot like this. You want to keep as much of the soil as you can. You can turn it over. Be careful with the top of the tree. And you just sort of slide it out of the pot. Now, if it's dry, you might have soil that crumbles away or, might be loose. This is nice, and you see it's all together in one bundle. You can see all the roots that have grown amidst the soil that was in the pot. So here's the tree that we're going to plant. Now sometimes with a tree that's grown in a pot, in a container, when the roots get to the edge of the pot, they start to circle around. That's not good for the tree. This is not doing it very much, but what we're going to do as a next step is we're going to loosen the roots and the soil around the edge to make sure that as the tree starts to grow, its roots can easily start to spread out in the soil. We're just going to set it down like this and just sort of gently massage it. If some soil falls away like you see, that's not a big deal. You want to keep all the roots together and you want to still protect the top of the tree. You don't want to be too rough with it. You need to be gentle. And even on the bottom, sometimes in a container grown tree, the bottom can have a lot of roots, so you want to make sure that those are nice and loose. Here's our tree all ready for planting. So next we're going to place the tree in the hole, in the center of the hole that we dug, and we're going to test it again for depth. since some of the soil fell away, we want to make sure that it's not too deep. This now might be a little too deep. We don't want to plant it too deep because that can affect the bark, the trunk, the roots. So it's important not to plant a tree too high or too low. I'm going to take this back out, set it to the side, and put some solid chunks of soil back in here to make sure it has a good resting place on the bottom, but to bring it up a little higher. You know, sassafras is used to make the original root beer. I can smell the roots of this tree have a root beer smell to them. Okay, that's much better. You can see this is where the trunk ends and the root system begins. So this is the level where we want the soil to be when we're done. So now our tree is right where we want it. Okay, now that we have our tree in the right spot, we're going to start filling back in the hole. You'll notice some of the soil that was in the pot that it came in is very dark. That means it has lots of organic matter. And then we have the surrounding soil, which is more brown. We're going to use both because the tree needs to adjust to the soil that surrounds it, but also we're going to give it a good head start by including the soil that it's already been growing in. So we're going to take a mix, and you can use your hand. It's very important that this soil here is loose that you're putting back in. We don't want to put large chunks in there because that can lead to air pockets, and we don't want air pockets in here because that can stop the roots from growing. So we're going to use really loose soil here. I'm mixing in some of the surrounding soil that we took out when we dug the hole, and then I'm going to add in some of the soil and sort of mix it in with my hands. This is why you want to wear gloves, so that it's got some of both. You don't really need to fertilize a new tree because we want it to adjust to the surrounding soil conditions anyway. Look at that, there's a flower bulb. I think it's a daffodil that I dug up. We'll plant that somewhere else. All right, now I'm going to finish filling the rest of the hole with soil using mostly my hands, but I might need my shovel to break up some of the bigger chunks. So now we've got most of the soil back in the hole. Of course, we're not going to use all of it because the tree's taking up some of that space, right? So there's no way we can put all of the soil back that we took out because now the tree's in there. If you look at the level, I did it exactly to where the trunk, the bottom of the trunk meets the top of the roots. So that's in the right place. We're going to give this a little bit of room. There's a friendly worm right here who's going to help create some air pockets in the soil, and that'll help with water and nutrients. I'm going to smooth this out to make a level surface. So now your tree's planted. The next thing that we're going to do that's really important as a next step is to mulch the tree. Now you can use a variety of types of mulch for this part of the tree planting. You can use hardwood mulch. Mulch is ground up trees and leaves and other stuff. And you can use hardwood mulch. There are lots of different types of mulches that you can use from a lot of different types of trees. What I'm going to use and what I like to do is simply use what was already here. What makes a great mulch for a tree is simply the leaves from the rest of the forest floor. So remember when I raked away the leaves to make the hole for the tree? I'm just going to rake them back. So you can tell this tree looks like it's just been growing in the woods all this time. Why is mulch so important? Several reasons. Mulch helps to reduce the runoff from water, helping the tree to keep more of it for itself. It also helps prevent the soil from washing away in a heavy thunderstorm or rainstorm. And then it also helps prevent weeds from growing up around the tree. So mulch has a lot of different beneficial purposes. This one we're using a natural mulch that the tree is used to anyway. All right, so our tree has sunlight and air to photosynthesize. What's the last thing it needs? We better give it some water. So the way I like to water a tree is to do it slowly. If you spray a bunch of water on here or leave a hose that's running at full strength, the water most times will just sort of run off and not actually get to the tree's roots. So what's really important is I'm going to let this drip here for several hours to really water in the tree, make sure that the roots get that water. And what this water can also help with is lowering the soil, mixing it in to get all those air pockets out of there by having the water settle the soil down into the hole. So thanks for joining me to learn how to plant a tree. You didn't know it was so complicated or important to follow these steps, did you? There is a right way to plant a tree. Special thanks to Octoraro Native Plant Nursery as our supplier for this Delaware native sassafras species.